Hassan Nasrallah had reiterated that all American military assets across this region are now in danger, that they are now targets. This was a point that he made several times throughout his speech, but he did draw an important distinction. Mr. Nasrallah went on to say, I want to be very clear, we do not mean American citizens or nationals. There are many Americans in our region. We don't mean to attack them, and it is wrong to harm them. Attacking U.S. civilians anywhere serves Trump's interests. He also went on to say the Americans will withdraw from our region humiliated in disgrace. And he also went on to say the minute Americans start seeing their sons in coffins, the Americans and President Trump will know they lost the war and the region. I think one of the more fascinating and telling things about the speech by Mr. Nasrallah, which lasted well over an hour, is the fact that he continued to speak about Iraq. That really seemed to be one of the main themes when it came to his remarks. And many of his remarks lined up quite a bit with what Iraq's caretaker Prime Minister Adel Abdel Mahdi was telling Parliament. His speech was happening at the same time as Mr. Nasrallah's. You had both of these men urging the U.S. to withdraw from Iraq, and this really seemed to suggest a very coordinated effort from Iran for perhaps both of these men to be relaying this same type of message. At the moment in Lebanon, you have another crisis going on. It's unclear how much exactly Hezbollah wants to ratchet up tensions, because Hezbollah is involved in trying to form a government here. This is a country that's on the verge of bankruptcy. This is a country that has not had a government for quite a while now. And this is a very important time in Lebanon where the Prime Minister designate is trying to put together a cabinet, and he cannot do so unless he has Hezbollah's support as well, because they are part of the major political bloc here. So this speech by Hassan Nasrallah, yes, it did threaten Americans, but it did not go into detail specifically about how exactly Lebanon would play a role in any retaliation. And because of that, it focused much more on Iraq's role in expelling Americans.
I was going to ask you, in fact, Mohammed, what was the likelihood of Hezbollah retaliating for Iran?
Well, that's the big question. We had expected to hear much more specificity from Mr. Nasrallah about what exactly might be happening in Lebanon. That's what a lot of analysts believed we might be hearing today. Many of the Lebanese, the last few days, they have been worried that because of what happened to Qasem Soleimani and because of Iran's strong ties and backing of Hezbollah, that perhaps retaliation could be seen against Americans in Lebanon, that perhaps violence could be revisited upon Lebanon. And that's not something people want to see happen here. But also you have to realize that Hezbollah is a bit boxed in right now because of all the politics going on right now, because of the fragile economy. And Hezbollah cannot really risk at this particular moment getting into a wider regional or international conflict. At least that's the conventional wisdom. So many people here at this hour believe that is why Mr. Nasrallah perhaps did not focus so much on what Lebanon's specific role might be in retaliation, spoke more about the region, spoke more about Iraq and Iran, and specifically spoke about the fact that it would not be U.S. civilians targeted, but it would be U.S. military assets targeted going forward.
Thank you for that, Mohammed Jamjoon, live for us in Beirut. Now, in an interview with a Hezbollah-affiliated television channel, Qasem Soleimani's daughter said she has no doubt there'll be retaliation for her father's death.
Before anything, I'd like to send my greetings to the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and also to the leader of the resistance, Uncle Hassan Nasrallah, whom I know for sure will avenge my father's blood. The entire world must know that Haj Qasem's assassination will not break us, and America must know that his blood is so precious.
And we heard earlier from Abbas Mousavi, a spokesman for Iran's foreign ministry. He says Iran isn't pursuing war, but is prepared for anything.
جمهوری اسلامی ایران دنبال جنگ نیست.
The Islamic Republic of Iran is not pursuing war, but we've made it very clear that we're ready for any kind of situation. In the past decades, the Iranian nation has always been ready to defend itself. The decision will always be made by the leadership, and they will prepare their responses as to how to retaliate in the best way. In the meantime, that is trying to avoid war.
Now, U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened to hit dozens of targets inside Iran if it takes any retaliatory action. In a series of tweets, Trump said Iran would be hit, quote, very fast and very hard if attacks were launched against any Americans or U.S. assets. Iran's foreign minister has responded, saying targeting cultural sites would be a war crime. Patty Cohen is live for us in Washington, D.C. Patty, let's start first with this Iraqi vote in Parliament calling for an end to U.S. troops, to the presence of foreign troops, including U.S. troops. What's the reaction likely to be from Washington?
Well, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has been making the rounds of the Sunday political talk shows, and he was pressed on that by several different of the anchors, the hosts, and he said, well, we hope that doesn't happen. We'll deal with it if it does, because this was all happening as the vote was taking place. But he said that he believed the Iraqi people really wanted the Americans there. This is going to go down in two separate ways. The president's going to be talking to two very different audiences if, in fact, U.S. troops are told to leave Iraq immediately. First, it's going to be his core base. He will probably do what he tends to do in these situations, is not say that this is a strategic setback for the United States in its fight against ISIL, but he'll say, look, I promised to get U.S. troops out of the Middle East, and here they're coming home. The other audience that he really has to be concerned about at this point are members of the U.S. Senate. Let's put this in the broader context. This is a president facing impeachment. He's already been impeached by the House of Representatives. We are probably just weeks away, possibly, from an impeachment trial in the Senate. U.S. senators are going to realize the gravity of what this will do to the U.S. effort to fight the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. That is not going to go over well. But at the same time, there is growing concern in the Senate, in the House, that the president is literally bringing the country to the brink of war with Iran. So that could also factor into the whole impeachment discussion in a way that perhaps the president doesn't want it to.
Patty, President Trump on Saturday threatened to hit 52 Iranian sites very hard and very fast, he said, if Iran retaliated. And at the same time, the U.S. administration says it wants to negotiate and doesn't want regime change in Iran. You wonder, what is the strategy, the Trump administration's strategy here?
Well, Secretary Pompeo, on these shows that he was just talking on, he actually said that if any American facilities or personnel are hit, that the U.S. will respond by targeting the Iranian personnel that planned the attack. So they're upping the threats, even though they're saying that they want to de-escalate the situation right now. The president in that tweet talking about 52 hits for the different, all of the Americans that were held hostage decades and decades ago. That's getting a reaction, especially from Democrats who agree with the Iranian foreign minister, and they're calling that a potential war crime. There has, of course, been discussion. The U.S. military does have to follow the orders of the commander-in-chief, but in the military code, if they feel from any commander an order is unlawful, it is their duty, they are told, to not carry it out. So this could be just more bluster from President Donald Trump. But there is growing concern, especially among Democrats, that the intelligence that the White House is giving them just doesn't add up to basically what happened here, an assassination of a foreign leader that the country is not technically at war with. We are going to see movement this week, the House, the Senate. We expect that they're going to get full classified intelligence briefings. If even some Republicans start to come out and say there's not enough there to take this dramatic of a step, you could see movement on legislation, because although U.S. presidents of recent times, they just take military action and they don't really consult with Congress, technically in the Constitution, Congress has to declare war. We've seen a Democratic senator say he was going to try and put a resolution on the floor that says specifically the U.S. cannot go to war with Iran. Now, whether the Republican leadership will actually let that onto the floor remains to be seen. But this is going to be a critical week, because in this system, it's supposed to be equal branches of government. So we'll see if Congress wants to assert themselves and be a check on this president, where they really haven't for the last couple of decades when it comes to presidents and armed conflict.
Patty, we've heard the political reactions from the Democrats and Republicans, but what about the wider American public? How much worry, how much concern is there that there could be a conflict with Iran?
Well, and this is the problem for this president. He was elected in large part because he'd said he's going to stop these wars. He's going to spend that money here at home. His base does not want him to see a conflict, another conflict in the Middle East. That said, these things can quickly escalate when you start doing tit-for-tat strikes. I can't say that there's been a whole lot of polling. A lot of that has to do with the calendar. It is the weekend here. All of this was happening over the Christmas holiday. And this tends to be a time, if there's a 2-week period in time when Americans tend to turn off the TV and stop reading the newspaper, it's right now. So when Congress comes back from their Christmas break, expect that we're going to have a lot more talk about it. There's going to be a lot more people tuning in. Then they're going to start to see the American public opinion polls. In general, though, not about this specific issue, the vast majority of the American public in previous polls before this have said they have no desire to see another conflict in the Middle East.
Thank you for that, Patty Culhane, live for us in Washington, D.C.